Ajaan Tong wakes up. I don't know how long he sleeps. I'm told he sleeps 3-4 hours a day. He's up at around 3, I suppose. And what he's doing, I'm not sure, because you're not allowed to get close to him at that time. But there was a time where I would meet him at his door. So I would get up at 2 a.m. and go and meditate outside of his door. And at 4:30, he would come out, and I would walk with him to chanting. It was at 4:30 in the morning, he would go to chanting. And then he'd give his talk, and we'd do a group meditation, just 10 minutes walking, 10 minutes sitting. But everything he did was measured. There'd be times where he'd be sitting there, and there'd suddenly be a whirlwind of activity around him. His driver would come and say, "Okay, Ajaan, time to go." Walk in, walk out. Ajaan Tong would sit there. Secretary would come in. "Okay, Ajaan, time to go. We're getting ready." And he's so clear. He knows exactly what's going on, and he doesn't have to listen to them, because when the time comes, he'll get up and he'll go. And then at the exact right time, he looks up at the clock, looks down, says to himself, I'm assuming says, intending to stand, noting his intention, and then standing up, standing, with perfect measured calm. I've never seen him off guard, where he suddenly does something without being clearly aware of what's going on. You can see it. There's no mistaking it. It's something that is clearly visible in everything he does, in how he eats, in how he walks, in how he talks. I've come to him asking a question about something, fairly trivial, a naughty point or something where I just wanted an answer, and he'll give me like 1,000 times what I was looking for. He'll hit me to the heart with something, because he knows it's good for me, because he knows what I need to hear. He wouldn't just tell someone out of a desire for them to have knowledge. He will always say it in a way that helps the person, because he sees clearly what is beneficial to the person. I once wrote down in my book, I would write everything he said down in a book, or everything I noticed, and I once wrote down, everyone who comes here gets something good. Yeah, and that may not mean so much, but if you saw the kind of people who came to see him, from politicians to crazy old monks and nuns, village people who had no interest in meditation, who wanted crazy things, monks coming to him from all over the country, and big monks, powerful monks, everyone who came to him got left with a smile, or left with if they weren't smiling, they had been hit really hard, and they were still reeling in surprise, really, because you go there expecting, we'll just go and talk to him, and we'll get this or that, and it's a shock for many people to get what you get from him. He doesn't teach theory. He's got a surprising lack of theoretical doctrine that he teaches. Hardly ever hear him go on and detail the Abhidhamma. I've rarely ever heard him talk about the Abhidhamma, yet he tells people to learn it. His way of teaching is it for that reason people often miss what he's talking about. People who are deep in study and so on will often in the beginning, or at least they feel like they haven't gotten what they came for, right? Because they're coming looking for a technical answer to their problem, a theoretical answer, and they don't get that. So he'll start talking about, well, not exactly, but some of the things he talks about, he harps on about, harps is not a good word. He goes on about food. He says how you have to know moderation in food. And for the longest time, I thought this was really kind of, mundane, right? Why are you aren't there more deep and profound things to talk about? But he always says how important moderation in eating is. for example. Of course, I found out later, and I thought about it later, and I realized that actually it was probably partially because a lot of the monks in the monastery weren't keeping the rules on eating, and there was a lot of eating in the evening and cooking in the evening, and a lot of fat monks, some fat monks, and fat novices, and so on. It's hard to imagine, no, how you can get fat on this diet, but they have a different diet. But it would be very simple, and not only the eating, but just about everything. And often he would just the teachings he'll give are just, you know, there are things that you could learn from the very basics of Buddhism. You know, they have these basic texts, and he'll go on about them. He'll talk about the very beginning teachings. He'll say at the very beginning of the Vinaya. I even have some of these things he said memorized, because to me they're just great to hear. Khin Ton Pra Vinay. It says at the very beginning of the Vinaya, and in this he means the Vinaya as taught in Thailand. They have this textbook. Sing Thi Kwan Siksa, the things that we should study. There's only 3. But you see how profound it is to reiterate this. Because here we are talking about things up in the sky, and he brings us down to earth. Sing Thi Lao Ja, Sing Thi Kwan Siksa, Mi Sam. Sin Sikha, Siksa Nai Leung Sin. The morality, training in morality. Samadhi Sikha, Siksa Nai Leung Samadhi. Training in concentration or focus, and Panya Sikha, training in wisdom. And then he talks about, I can't remember in that talk or in other talks, normally he'll talk about what is morality. Well, morality is when you bring the mind back, keeping the mind from running away, keeping the mind from chasing after our desires and so on. This is morality. Because when you let your mind go, this is where immorality comes from, right? So bringing it back, what does that lead to? It leads to concentration. What is concentration? Concentration is keeping your mind on the object, focusing on the object. What is wisdom? Wisdom is knowing the object. In fact, the funny thing that teachers will always say is that wisdom is actually just, when you say rising and falling to yourself, that's actually wisdom. Funny, isn't it? Because it seems so stupid. It's like, well, I know it's rising, right? The problem is you really don't. Maybe for a second you experience the rising, but then you know, hey, my stomach is rising. Isn't that great? Or, oh, it's all stuck. It's not deep enough. It's not smooth enough, and so on. And so on, and so on, and so on. We don't really know it. When you know it, that's, in a sense, panya. Panya means to know thoroughly. When you know thoroughly that this is rising, that's wisdom. Because that's dwelling in the present moment. It's being with reality. And an arahant is, an enlightened being is like that all the time. They're aware of the reality at all times. So Ajaan Tong is a sort of no-nonsense teacher. In fact, I would say the theory that you get from him is not, there's not much, but it's incredibly clear. I had teachers before Ajaan Tong, and I was able to grasp what they were teaching, but I couldn't make head or tail of it. I couldn't tell what was the first step, what was the second step. It seemed all jumbled and kind of ad hoc. You know, for this person I'm going to say this thing based on my experiences and so on. Ajaan Tong, when I started practicing with him, everything was crystal clear, to the extent that I knew exactly how to teach people, and I knew what steps to lead people through from one day to the next. His teaching made perfect sense and went in perfect order. And really everything that he taught was like that, or is like that. I'm assuming he's still teaching. I haven't been in touch for a while. That's the thing about being a penniless monk. You can't just fly and go see your teacher. So now here I am in another country. Someday, hopefully, I'll get back there. But I should probably keep in touch, no? Anyway, I assume that he's still there teaching. And his teaching is just everything is the same. He will say the same thing 1,000 times without ever getting bored or ever having to alter it. He does alter it and he does change, but he's consistent. He's incredibly consistent, and sometimes to the point where it's like uh, he's not trying to sell you himself. He's telling you the truth, and he'll say it to you 1,000 times. He'll tell you it again and again and again because there's nothing else. You're not going to get him to change his way of teaching. He tells you the truth, and he gives people very simple teachings, and they won't get the theory out of it. They won't get an incredible amount of theory, and you won't hear him reciting long discourses or talking about the Abhidhamma or so on. But he'll give you what you need at that moment, and that's 1,000% clear. Anyone can vouch for that. When they go to him, they get what they need, and it takes them the next step. It's a lot like the practice. When you practice meditation, if you haven't practiced intensively, you might not have felt this yet. But when you enter into the meditation practice, you have a lot of expectations of what you're going to get out of it. And those expectations are, for the most part, blown out of the water. And the greatest part of meditation is realizing that your purpose for meditating is wrong. And actually changing that, altering your path. It's a very profound part of the practice. It's not just learning more. It's learning what to look for, learning what to learn. And he does that. He changes people. He doesn't just give people the answers. He changes their questions. He changes what they're looking for. He's got to be the best teacher by far that I've ever met. And maybe maybe I have met and I just haven't learned from them. But I've been I think I've been fairly observant, and I've watched a lot of different monks and a lot of different teachers, and I've never met anyone that I could say, from my knowledge, from what I know of them, compares to him. Just in terms of his practice, I've only seen him get agitated once, and to me it was like a perfect sign that he never gets agitated, because his way of getting agitated was like to say something and then go back to total peace and calm. What it was is, I gave him these CDs of one of his teachers, these really neat set of MP3 teachings. It was just like a ton of teachings from one of his teachers in Bangkok, who is very intellectual, and so has a lot of long, lengthy teachings, but they're really good. Immediately he gets up and takes me into his room, and he wants to listen to them. And they're like, no, he's got no way to listen to them. And I hooked him up and he was able to listen. And they were very angry at me because they didn't want him to listen to the people who take care of him, who I don't have much good to say about, didn't want him to listen at that time. And he wanted to listen. So there I was listening. I got in real trouble for this. I was yelled at and scolded, not knowing the right time and so on. But Ajaan Tong got to listen to the Dhamma, so I was happy. And so I sat there, and they came in and said, "Okay, Ajaan, time to go." And this was a secretary, and Ajaan said, 5 minutes, give me 5 minutes. And then he went out, stormed out, boom, boom, boom. And then the driver comes in, "Okay, Ajaan, time to go." And Ajaan goes, 1 minute, can't I just have 1 minute? And then he said, "These guys, they don't have a clue." And then he went back to listening. And we sat there and we listened for a couple of minutes, boom, 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 storming in and out, these guys who were totally furious. And then he said, "Okay, thank you very much." And he got up and he went on. And so I tell that not to give you a sign that because I didn't, it increased my respect for him to see him do that. He wasn't a pushover, but he certainly wasn't interested in these guys. He was just like, "I'm listening." 1 minute, it was really, his whole body shook. It was really funny. Yeah, I really love him. He's a wonderful person. I think of him as my father in the Dhamma, or grandfather maybe, he's old enough. Okay, that's an answer, hopefully. It's 15 minutes.